Hi, MBJV listeners. In honor of International Day of the Girl, which is on October 11th, No Boxes Just Verses presents Verses in Service, a leadership miniseries. This is a special 7-part episode series that will run through October 23rd. And across this miniseries, you'll hear from many extraordinary women, from tech innovators, culture leaders and icons, educators, filmmakers, cybersecurity and AI experts, legal and governance leaders, and community builders. Their story is a masterclass in service-driven leadership, mentorship that multiplies opportunity, purpose that outlasts titles and boxes, and community that lifts the next generation. So we're marking this day, this moment, by amplifying the voices that open the doors for girls everywhere. I hope you enjoy this special. This is Verses in Service.
Welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses, the podcast where we go beyond the bios, beyond the titles, and we really explore the lessons and the journeys that have shaped today's most inspiring leaders, all through the songs that have moved them. Each week, we build a playlist of a leader's life. 5 lessons, 5 songs, 1 unforgettable playlist.
Let's put the pedal to the metal, let the top lean back. I don't know where we're going, I don't know what we're running to. I'm checking for you, how you feel about that. I think it's time we rendezvous.
And today, we are so honored to have our guest, Debbie Taylor Moore. Debbie, welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses.
Shannon, thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I just can't thank you enough for inviting me.
Well, you guys are in for a treat because Debbie's life and career is just so inspiring, and I'm so excited to share all that you have accomplished with your career. I'm so proud of you, by the way.
Thank
I'm so
you.
excited to share that with our audience because I've seen you speak at so many conferences. We actually met at a CES that every year in Las Vegas, there's the annual Consumer Electronics Show. And Debbie was there. She was the speaker. We got to meet. And I was just so inspired by your journey, but also just seeing what you do for a living. There aren't a lot of people that look like you doing this. And how long you've been doing it and what you accomplished. I was like, I got to know her. I got to meet this lady. And you were just as gracious in person as you were sitting there on the stage. So,
Thank you.
I'm so excited.
Well, I feel the same way about you. You're extremely, very, not only prominent, but very, very inspiring. And so this is great. I'm loving this.
Well, we're going to jump into it. I'm going to share with our listeners a little bit about your amazing background. So you have been in cybersecurity, a cybersecurity professional for more than 23 years. I'm going to be honest with you. People have been talking about cyber a lot in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. But 20 years ago, if somebody came to me and said, yeah, I'm a cybersecurity professional, I'd be like, come again? Like, what does that even mean? So truly a trailblazer in that field. You're a 2-time founder of companies. You've been a CEO, a VP of security for IBM. You have led security at the intersection of AI for a long time, robotics and quantum. And we're going to get into, I need you to give my listeners a layman's definition of quantum because everybody talking about AI. Not enough people talking about quantum, in my opinion. You have launched a new advisory firm called the Quantum Crunch. I love that name, by the way. So I'd love to get into how you came into that.
Sure.
You help boards and the C-suite and insurance companies manage the security risks associated with quantum computing. You've developed and led security programs across 26 countries in 4 continents. You serve on the board of a Consumer Technology Association. That's the organization that runs the CES, the annual CES.
Yep. That's it.
Also have been with the Pentagon Cybersecurity Task Force.
Cyber AB.
You've testified on AI security before the 118th Congress, and you've been featured in the book, The Gentle Art of Leadership by Brian Donovan and Dean Phelan, thank you. And you're just an overall such a powerhouse, especially in a field. Cybersecurity is one of those fields where, it is really technical. Not a lot of people understand it. And I'm loving that we have people like you fighting the good fight for us. You reside in Virginia with your husband, Daniel, and your 2 beloved adult sons.
Yes.
Debbie, welcome to No Boxes, Just Verses.
Thank you. Shannon, it's such a pleasure to be here. It really is.
So take us back to young Debbie. Where did you grow up? tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Obviously, you were always a smart kid. I already know that without even knowing your story. So I want to know a little bit about how that got channeled for you, where you went to school, like the early childhood and adolescent, early adulthood days with your family. You picked a song called No Matter What by Badfinger. So I also want to know why that song.
Okay, so I would say, first of all, in terms of the song, No Matter What by Badfinger, I'll start there. It's basically a song that's kind of like about unconditional love. It's about the idea that no matter what, wherever you go, whatever you do, I'm always there with you. But also, it's about knock down the old gray walls, be a part of it all. And I have to say, I would be nowhere without my parents. My parents were very hardworking people who believed that you could be anywhere and you could go anywhere. They were really like the first true people who really kind of opened my eyes, even as a little kid, to something that's even worse than any racism or anything like that, but placism. People sort of saying, you can't be here, or you shouldn't be there. This is not your spot to be in. And they always pushed me really hard to do things that other people maybe thought like, oh, that's not for us, or that's not something you should be doing. And, essentially, I started out in a really kind of a tough school system in CPS, Chicago Public Schools, my first couple of years. And it was so rough that my parents moved with 2 years of equity in their house. They moved to a community in the suburbs that they were so quasi-integrating. There were only very few Black families there in order to work and live in a community where there's a little safer and a little better school system. And that was a big sacrifice. But when I look back on it now, they're both no longer here with us. It feels like a tremendous gift because it really did change the trajectory of my life. When I got to that school system, the school system assumed because I had, been a product of CPS and I literally was in the first grade, just finished first grade, they automatically wanted to put me in the bottom reading group or whatever.
Right.
And my mom was a fierce advocate. I had tested out really well on the Iowa tests, which were, an indicator of future success potentially for students. And they were what they used to place you in
Right.
whatever grade you were supposed to be in. And they essentially, she fought for it. She fought for it. And I got, along with a couple of allies, and put into really challenging reading group and many of the reading group and math group. And that was sort of the beginning of kind of understanding that potential lies in the person, not in where they come from necessarily. And so that was a really important lesson, but also the unconditional love of having people that you can fall back on and people who think so highly of you and have them be so close to you as your parents. I mean, that's a real gift for me.
Well, you had supporters. We'll talk about in your career. You've had lots of supporters, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
All successful people have had a lot of supporters, guys.
Oh,
That's a news flash. But your first supporters were your parents, and the fact that they made that sacrifice to leave where they lived to get you a better opportunity and support, their young daughter. That was like a good modeling for you. So you kind of grew up in the burbs of
Chicago. Yep.
And you stay there throughout your whole schooling and high school and all that?
Yeah. So I stayed there through high school and went to Bradley University, which was a PPWI.
And how did you pick Bradley? Right, that's just
Public, private, predominantly white institution.
Yeah.
I picked Bradley because I had one cousin that had gone there. Like literally, it was kind of a random choice in that it was a private school. My parents approved of it, the distance that it was from home, and it was a kind of known as like the Midwestern Harvard, which is kind of funny to me because anyway, that's what people called it.
That's what people called it.
That's what people called it. And I'll tell you what lesson I got from Bradley, and I went into college. I don't know that I was somebody that was like super directed around STEM or anything like that. I really very much wanted to have a liberal arts type of education, but I figured that I could always dip into the things I loved a lot. I was that kid that got, a chemistry set every year, but didn't want to necessarily be like chemistry girl or biology girl.
Like you liked it, but then there was
But it's
also
like-
the realities of
Yeah.
what does this mean? Am
Well,
I like a nerd?
Well, I guess I was maybe a little bit aware of branding even back then. But I went to that school, and when I was in my freshman year, there was a guy who basically was running the student arbitration board. And I kind of had this leaning toward like thinking I might like get into the law arena, but it was pretty much the most powerful position a student could have on campus. So basically, you handled all non-academic sanctions. So anybody gets in trouble for anything other than academia related issues, you saw their case. You and a small board of people made the decision whether they stay or go. I sat on academic review board, which was also all faculty with only 2 student representatives. And what I learned in those instances is truly about the table and who's sitting at the table and how you have these random people deciding your fate. And to be a part of that, but also learned a lot about confidentiality, about being very responsible in terms of decision making and understanding the weight of the decisions that you're making. And that was for me at a very young age. I don't know that I appreciated how much that would help me later in life, but at the time it did feel weighty. It did feel like a big responsibility, and I took it really seriously. But the most important thing is that the gentleman who sat in that role for the previous 3 years literally groomed me for it. And it tells you something about legacy, because there was really no, we were less than 5% of the population at Bradley, African-American community. And for the most part, you have a role like that, and it is something that can translate into so many other opportunities within the university, but also the people that you meet. It was kind of a big deal. And of course, I pledged sorority and did all the other fun things that folks do in college. But by the time I graduated and went on to like my first positions and such, I think that the college experience is like extraordinarily important. And today I get a lot of people who say, for instance, our kids are interested in cybersecurity or they want to get into this field. And it's really it's been hard for them to do. And I try to really work very closely with young people who believe they're on this path, because again, a lot of times you do run into the placism thing. Like maybe their friends aren't engaged in that way, or maybe their life path doesn't necessarily point to like, this is a career that would work out real well for me.
I think as part of the thing is, like you said, first of all, meeting somebody who's doing it that looks like you is transformational. And you just said something to me that was actually a personal unlock. I went to the University of Virginia. We have an honor code. It's a really big thing, like for us. And I actually just made me think about, oh my gosh, my junior year, I wound up being part of like the student group that administered the honor code for violations. Like again, they weren't academic violations. They were like I remember there was a case where one roommate said somebody stole something from the other roommate. It was this whole thing. And I remember being at that table. That was my first time. And I hadn't made that connection about being at that table and how I was the lone voice in that room of like 20 people who was like, well, wait a minute. What about this and this? Why is everybody ganging up on her? Like I was giving them another perspective of why the person was acting a certain way, and they had never thought about it in that way. And so you're right. It just an unlock for me. It was like, oh wait, so again, to your point, there are ways to get seats at the table very early on in your life that I actually hadn't made that connection about how that led to later on in life.
Oh, absolutely. And having that access is important because you bring a different perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Which actually impacted the outcome, because then some other people were like, well, wait a minute, let's look at this differently. So, thank you for sharing that.
And you start to understand too the dynamic of groupthink. Yeah, how strong that is, how strong a pull that has, that's been convened to maybe make a decision or do something.
So let's move on to this next phase of your life and your career. The song that you picked is Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears. I love that song.
I do too.
Everybody wants to rule the world. Yeah, I love that song.
So beautifully composed, and it's very soaring. And you just get, it's so 80s too.
It's so 80s. I love the 80s. Yeah, that is true too. So like, why that song? At this point, you have met somebody named Dan, or maybe you met him before, but you're certainly in the Dan stage. You're young in your working career. Take us through that stage of life.
Well, it's funny. So I started to work for an oil corporation. In that role, it was my first real professional role. In that role, it was clear that the company was really wanting to try to push people forward into roles that, would lead them to management eventually. And I would say there are a couple of pivotal things that happened. First of all, meeting Dan, because Dan is my husband and we've been together for 38 years, 33 of them married.
Wow.
And we met actually after training. We got assigned to Michigan at the same time.
Okay.
But I really wanted to, it was very important to me to succeed in this role because it was not like kind of a traditional path for me, but it was a large corporation. It was kind of the way people were programmed during those times was you land your first job
Yep.
and you go, you hit it hard. Anyway, so to make a long story short, we met and we were both, I guess you could call it like sort of assigned. You would get assigned anywhere in the country, and we were assigned, and we met each other actually in the district office, only to find that we had actually been like 6 weeks apart in training. At any rate, once we met, we fell in love, and it was a workplace type of a thing. And so that in itself would be challenging, but it's also interracial. And so that is another
And
challenge.
had you interracially dated before him?
I had maybe once or twice. Yeah, once or twice, but before him, but nothing serious.
Had he
anything like that.
interracially dated before you?
He hadn't. He hadn't. And so, it was the crazy thing was how alike we were. We were like the same person virtually, just different skin, hair, eyes.
He grew up in the Midwest too?
He grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And in like South Jersey in the Philly-ish area. And he was wonderful, just so wonderful. We grew to be fast friends.
I see.
Is what happened in the workplace. But even the fast friend part is we're young people. We're like 23, 24 years old. We're not aware of this being a challenge or a problem for anybody. But clearly it was. And so our district manager separated us,
Oh my.
put us in different parts of the country, me in Boston and him in California. And it was one of those times when you ask yourself, like, did I miss something? Like, is that like I totally missed this is something that, was going to be a problem for everyone. But anyway, the long story short, as I said earlier, the net of it was that we kept in touch, obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
And
Clearly.
we married. And the story several years later was that actually some of the people that made those decisions end up working for my husband, who still remains in the industry. At Mobil Oil Corporation was where we were. There was a group out of Boston called the J. Howard Associates, and they did a special class for folks who they were looking at as potential managers. And this was an organization that once they closed the door on all of us recruits that had been assigned to come to this boot camp, they talked a lot about self-doubt, about personal power, about all these things. And we were all people of color. And literally they had half of the room, at least, like grown men crying in this session. It was so powerful. And it was probably the most powerful workshop I've been in my entire career, because what it really pointed up was the idea that we have a lot of personal power that we never really fully utilize it because of self-doubt. And the self-doubt piece of it, they really unpacked that. And we did exercises where they'd ask us to write down, what are the perceptions of the outside world about people that look like you? What do they say about you? And we write down all of these things, and we look at each other's lists, and they were all very similar. And then they asked us to put the stories behind them, like what context they were hearing these bad things about. And it was all really negative stuff. And there were some people that really were broken by this. And they were asking, like, why am I even here? Does the company want to help me, or is they just breaking me down? But by the time we emerged from that training, we were probably one of the most powerful groups of people. It was so enlightening to really understand yourself and understand the way the world perceives you, but also the whole idea of self-doubt creating a barrier to access. That you have to actually go out there and don't ask to be invited.
Yeah.
Go out there and be a part of anything that you are pursuing. And that lesson for me was probably the most powerful corporate lesson, at least, that I had received.
Wow.
To that point. And that experience of being with all those other people who are a little bit more senior than me, but it made me go forward in a way that I felt like I had X-ray vision after that. Like I could see how people were thinking and see how people might be motivated and see how that might impact me, but also how I need to react in kind.
So it sounds like you not only now are you in these spaces where you're accelerating your career, but you're also learning valuable management and leadership skill sets. You're learning that from others, you're being trained about it. And so this next kind of phase of your life, you talk about having to push through some personal challenges,
Yes.
emergency deliveries, some grief, some workplace inequity, and you mentioned a friend's advice that changed everything for you. This friend gave you the courage to pivot into this thing called IT and how that really changes your whole life. And it's interesting because you said you were so busy during that time that you were like, I don't know, I wasn't really listening to anything, but it was probably anything by Nirvana or Al Green. And this is a song that I had to look up. I'll be honest with you, because I know a lot of songs by him, but I didn't know this one. Shala, Make Me Happy, Al Green. So tell us about this phase and this pivot, which is a huge one.
Oh, absolutely. So it was one of those times when, and anybody who's had children, you've got married and you have this dream of having children, you're making the decision whether or not you're going to be a stay-at-home mom or if you're going to go. And that was never in the cards for me, particularly to be a stay-at-home mom. I just assumed that I'd be able to handle all of this stuff and this will be fine. We can do this. And we planned our lives that way, and we did. We actually did. But I think that the level of effort that you give during that phase in your life when you have small children you're managing, and you're managing to be very present in their lives and not just process driven, but also answer the call to your company. Like each of my kids, I worked till like I was in labor virtually. And I think that wasn't necessarily necessary
Right.
to do that. But I felt a lot of pressure to not to just achieve, but to keep all the balls in the air, keep the balance going.
Be
And
superwoman.
yeah, and you never give yourself permission to be otherwise. When I look back on those times, I realized that moving into the different roles that I had, that I was always in this role that was a 360 type of a role. It was like oh, here's this scorched earth assignment that can you clean this up for us?
Yeah.
Like nothing's ever happened here. We've never been happy with this assignment, or these clients don't like us. Can you work with them? And I would turn it around. And that was kind of became a specialty. But I don't know if that's like necessarily a specialty that you want to stay at. You might want to do that a few times and then be rewarded. And I'll never forget when I came back from not a particularly long maternity leave with my second son, I had gone out as the top person in terms of the production, in terms of revenue, in terms of you name it. And it was a really good feeling to finish so strong, and you come back and you're thinking, my place is going to be great when I get back there. I'm going to expand on what I've created. And I came back to find that my assignment had been given to somebody else. And that essentially they said, well, you had 2 kids. We didn't know if you were going to come back or not. So we kind of gave your assignment to Joe. So anyway, it was at that time that I was riding home from a meeting where I realized that I was like starting all over and not being rewarded with a promotion or with whatever that next step would normally be for other people, but literally having to start over again and with 2 kids. And I was driving home and a girlfriend called. And she was asking me how things were going, and I was telling her about it. And she was like, I don't know, you've done some pretty amazing things before. This IT thing would be easy for you. It'd be like taking candy or a baby. Because I'd worked in health care and had done a lot of work around DNA probe technology, working with pathologists, always trying to make the gray area clear for people, or plain speak, a very deeply complex technical concept or solution or automation. And it was the best advice anybody had ever given me in my life, because I took being so disappointed to actually look at change, because change is the last thing you want after you have 2 kids. You're creating a path for yourself that will be a stable one so that it's all manageable. And the opposite, like who does that? Who just changes everything all at once? But anyway, I did.
Well,
I
thank
did.
goodness you did, because it led to, what you're doing now with cyber and quantum. So you make this pivot. You wind up doing it. So the song that you picked next, you picked I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. And I was like, there's got to be a story behind that because basically you made the switch, you're in corporate America, you're doing the thing in IT, and then you decide you made another switch and decided you're going to do startups, be an entrepreneur. Like, that's a huge switch from your quote unquote stable corporate job. All in IT, I get it.
Yeah.
But like, why that song though? That song means a lot of stuff to me, but I'm like,
How is that?
yeah, how's that woman need it?
Well, I would say, first of all, that when that song came out, it was in 1992,
Yeah.
right? So it was actually before I got married. Like, literally, we were engaged when that song came out. But when I was making like some of the biggest changes was in 2012 when Whitney Houston passed away.
That's right.
And what was interesting to me was that I found myself having that song on replay all the time because I couldn't help but think of her life being like this zenith, like her just going out there and it's just with this meteoric rise, and then having everything just sort of like really be challenging,
Yeah, she
and
has
having a lot of difficulties.
Yeah.
And it was at that point in time, I had done a lot of things. So I had moved over into IT. I had gone to work for IBM. I had worked for Microsoft. And it was at Microsoft where I had decided that I wanted to go into cybersecurity. And the reason for that was because at IBM, I'd been exec of the year. I'd won a car. I'd a trip around the world. I had my little kids in my convertible that they didn't even like. They'd rather have mommy at home
Right.
than all of the career accolades and all of that. And it was just about that time when I started to really think about how important. I thought I did a pretty good job with balance. Like now looking in the rearview mirror, our kids turned out fantastic. But at the same time, it was a great sacrifice from a personal standpoint. You can only work and sleep 4 hours a night for so long before, it will take its toll. And I kind of looked at that song as one of those parallels where when I hear that song, I don't necessarily hear a song about a love story per se. I think of that singer's life, if that makes sense. And I think about how brightly she was shining, but how it all fell apart. And you have to really be very intentional about the things that you love and care about. And so when I worked in corporate, I moved to working in startups, but also working as an independent consultant because it gave me much more flexibility at a time when my kids were elementary school to adolescence,
Yeah.
where you really want to be very involved in who are their friends, what are they doing. You want to be there to support them during like a very important time in their lives where you need that flexibility. And being an entrepreneur helped me to do that. So it was sort of like a sequence where I decided to go into security when we had like some of the first major really bad outages. At that time, I was working for Microsoft and we had no answer. And I would defy anyone in the world to say that that's not true because we had no answer. And we were trying to appease the clients who had been had their networks down for like 7 days. And here comes Bill Gates, who's coming to Mid-Atlantic to come and talk to all these clients. And so the clients come from 3 hours away to both meet him, but also to kind of feel like, what's your answer here? Like, well, I want restitution. I've lost profits. I've had downtime. And he came out and he gave a 20-minute speech where he said that they were going to take all the developers and take them out of the office and into the field and teach them how to secure code. And I was stunned, and the people were stunned, and the people were angry. And that was my origin story for security. I said to myself, there's got to be people out here doing this because there has to be a better answer than that. Like, I can't believe we brought all these people, this big entourage, and that's the answer, is that we're going to take people back and teach them secure coding. It's an answer, but it can't be the only answer. And so I started to work with 2 guys who were former NSA folks who were trying to help government secure their systems, and they were working in a small company almost altruistically. It was a startup, but they were really working to try to build something. And I said to them, with what you're doing here, this could be amazing if we, really take policy and really build programs and really create a foundation for government to start working off the problems that they have in terms of, vulnerabilities and dealing with the threats. Nothing like today's environment, but back then, we built the original security programs for much of government, and we sold our company to Verizon. And so that was the beginning of being in startups, because I then started to do that for other folks. So it was, let's build the program, let's deploy the program, let's build revenue and value for the startup, and let's get it acquired as quickly as possible.
Wow. And so you were able to take so many lessons that you had learned, and then you just basically lifed, and you had to do what you needed to do for your family. But the lesson there was, just because this part of my life is taking me out of being able to do all these other things doesn't mean I still can't achieve. I still can't try to build, my career. So not only did you do that, I would dare say that that stepping stone led specifically to where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
Had you not made that pivot.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that when I first walked into that first company, I was not a cybersecurity person. I got a clearance, and I went in, and it was a fraternity. It was 150 men.
Wow.
It was 150 men. I remember my first interview. I'm walking in, and I'm going back to the back of the office to meet with the C-suite, if you will. And as I'm walking past all of these, they were desktop computers at that time. All of these desktop computers, half of them had Hustler screensavers.
Oh my.
Okay, so
That's a different time.
It was a different time entirely, and different time entirely.
Right.
So I knew what I was getting into was going to be challenging in that way, that you have to find your fit.
Yeah.
If you're bringing something that's slightly different than what's already there, it can be intimidating for people.
Yeah.
They lived in a very soft startup culture that was very, when I say soft startup culture, I don't mean soft in terms of the work. The work was very hard. These people were actually really, really bright, but it was very fraternal, very casual.
That whole we have all these rules, policies, and procedures that hasn't been built up because their job was to break stuff fast.
Yes.
Defect, then iterate. So it's just a different type of environment. You had to change yourself a bit to even thrive in that, but it works. It actually winds up working for you. And so people talk about cyber, people talk about AI. Your company is called Quantum Crunch. Mm-hmm. So I think a layman's understanding of what is even quantum would be helpful. The song that you picked is Die With a Smile by Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga. So tell us where you are today, and what is quantum crunch? What is even quantum computing?
Okay, so quantum computing, let me make the distinction. When you look at everything we do today is on classical computing, which is very binary, but also in a way it's sort of serial in nature in the way that processor solves problems. Quantum computing is otherworldly. It deals with physics, mechanical physics. It also is parallelism. So say for instance, I'll give you a good example of, you have two mazes, and you have two mice, and you have cheese at the end of the maze. The classical computing paradigm will go and try to find the route. That route doesn't work. It tries another route. Mm-hmm. And it keeps going through a process of deduction until it gets to the end. With quantum computing, the power, the speed of compute is so great that it's parallelism. It tries all the routes at once.
So it's doing all the routes.
And it uses algorithms to do this. But one thing that is very important is that we are quantum cyber. So Quantum Crunch, we handle what is just simply a use case for quantum, because quantum has a lot of great potential around anything like drug discovery. When you think of how it takes 20 years to bring a drug to market, how computational capability of quantum computing can shorten that time to very rapid delivery of drugs. Material sciences, when you consider things that lengthen battery life, or materials that we use today that
this battery in my phone that's going to die.
Yes. So these sorts of things that take lots and lots of time and science,
right,
it can just work on them much quicker. Say, for instance, here's something for a financial world. So you know how you do Monte Carlo simulation?
Yes.
Imagine being able to run a level of predictive analysis across every single possible scenario.
Yeah, that's just...
It's otherworldly.
Otherworldly.
Yeah. So that is the great carrot like that we're all like going after for quantum compute.
Okay.
Because of that great computational power, there's also the downside of that is that modern day encryption is literally compromised by that level of
So
computation.
when you mean modern day encryption, you mean like when I type in my passwords and things that like how you encrypt, how you protect my data from bad actors.
From unauthorized access.
So I'm
So
trying
no
to
one
break
can
it down.
no one can see it.
Yeah.
No one can see how your data gets from A to B and intervene and take it.
So
And that's what encryption does. So
you're working on cyber to protect that.
we're working to protect that because that's the underpinning of our entire economy.
Yeah.
How we do bank transactions, how
Yep.
we send emails, how we protect the integrity of file systems, all of that. It's all encrypted. Think of it as just a really hard math problem to solve. And where classical computing, it would take a million years. With the most state-of-the-art encryption with our classical computing today. With quantum, it could be broken within hours.
Wow.
And so that's what we're a little frightened over is that possibility because we in the United States are not the only people developing quantum computers. We also have nation states and adversaries who are working very hard on this problem as well, who don't necessarily share their progress with developing quantum tech that can sufficiently break encryption. And so we help people to identify the assets that they have that need to be protected. And we help them to build a plan because this is something that has to be done over the next 5 years. And, it's not Y2K. Y2K was a lot simpler than this. It's a bit more complex. But it's also one of those things where if you start the process, then you have a much better shot than if you do nothing at all. And we speak with boards and C-suite and insurance on the actual risk management
of this whole thing. Somebody told me that I was talking to about quantum, think about how you have so many passwords now, and you protect your bank accounts and this, that, and the other. They were like, with quantum computing in the very near future, we won't be doing there will be other ways to verify your identity that's not just having a 4-digit or a 6-digit password because quantum computing is going to take that off the table.
And we are already into so many multi-factor authentication methods. You're using irises, thumbnails, and everything else in order to be able to spell out who a person is, what they have, what they own, and what they should have access to. And quantum just takes that to a whole other level.
Well, I'm glad we have you working on it. That's for sure. We need a lot of yous. Your playlist is amazing. Your journey has been so inspirational. But before we wrap it up, I always like to ask my guests, A, how can we find you and support what you were doing? And then the next thing I always ask is, give us one bonus song that when you hear it, you just smile. It just makes you happy.
Let's see. So my bonus song is Hey Ya by Andre 3000. Yes.
Yes. That song.
That became like a celebration song in our house during the pandemic. I don't know why, but like when everybody turned it on, it just like gave folks joy. I think you have to decide and be very intentional about joy in and of itself. But that's it for me. In terms of where we're going, my big, I would say, wish would be our big audacious goal is really to, between now and 2026, to help 100 companies, not necessarily in the S&P 50 or 500, but 100 companies build their plan for preparing for the quantum era, build their security plan, not necessarily their business goals around how they might use quantum tech or quantum compute, but protecting systems, data from this potential apocalyptic disaster.
Right. And you want to help smaller companies do this.
I want to help, mid-market and low end of the...
I love that.
Yeah.
And how can we find you? How can we follow you?
You can follow me on LinkedIn. And we will be posting the website and all of the company page information. I go globally to so many conferences and speak on this topic, but also there's a lot that are local or, within the United States as well. But I work globally. And it's important that we really remember that we are a global community with this. This is something that doesn't just impact financial institutions or
Impacts
critical
everybody.
infrastructure. It's everyone.
Impacts everybody.
It's everybody. So it is something you'll hear more about in the future.
Well, Debbie, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for enlightening us. We got a lesson on quantum computing. You all should understand it now. But if you don't, we will certainly have how to follow you and how to follow your website in the show notes. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for your journey. I want to thank you for trying to protect our data. We are rooting for you. We know you can do it. And, we've had so much fun. We're going to recap your playlist. This is the Debbie Taylor Moore playlist. The first song is No Matter What by Badfinger. Next, we have Everybody Rules the World by Tears for Fear. Then third, she had to think about it a little bit. It's called Shala Make Me Happy by Al Green. Fourth, we have I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. 5, we have Die With a Smile by Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga. And our bonus song is Hey Ya by Andre 3000. Debbie, thank you so much for being a guest on No Boxes, Just Verses.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for listening to No Boxes, Just Verses. And if this episode moved y'all, please share it, rate us, follow the show on your favorite platform, and we can keep building our leadership playlists together. So you can find me, guys, on Instagram as Shannon Nash 1 and No Boxes, Just Verses on Instagram. You can also find me on LinkedIn as Shannon Nash ESQ CPA. You can also find No Boxes, Just Verses on LinkedIn. You can visit our website at noboxesjustverses.com. Finally, don't forget to check out the show notes. The show notes are super important because this is where the playlists will live. You will be able to get these playlists on Apple and Spotify. You'll also be able to follow up and see how to reach out to the guests, follow them, and support them. Until next time, I need you to stay unboxed. You come for the stories, but you stay for the playlists. I'm Shannon Nash, and I'm out.